for today. We will start obviously with the land acknowledgement, but first we would like to ask if everybody is okay if we record the session. It's only for educational purposes. If somebody is not comfortable, let us know so we will not move the camera. Okay? Very good. Sarah?
Yeah,
Good.
okay.
So we will start, please.
Yes, I'm going to read the land acknowledgement. So I just would like to acknowledge that the land where we work and live is the traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the West Turkey. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which was Turkic, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1726. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized the Mi'kmaq and Wallace Turkic title and established a rule for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Before we start with our exceptional guest speakers that we have today, I hope that all of you have one ticket because we will have a door prize. So make sure that you have one, okay? If not, let us know. Awesome. Very good. At the end of the event, we will do it. So we have two amazing guest speakers. Emily Bodashan, we are going to start with Emily. She's an experienced clinical laboratory director. She has a Bachelor of Applied Science focused in medical and applied biotechnology from Charles Sturt University. She's an activist for harm reduction, avoiding misconceptions and biases towards those suffering from substance use disorder and the homeless as well. One of her many goals is to reduce some of the stigma. She has a personal story and would like to share all the lessons learned from that experience. She attended the Harm Reduction Symposium in 2018, and this is where she was first introduced to Moms Stop the Harm. She joined as a member in 2019, as she has a strong desire to advocate not only for harm reduction, but also for prevention by speaking to healthcare professionals, parents, educators, everyone. Thank you, Emily.
So I first want to thank everybody for coming. It's really nice to see this many people turn out for this conversation. And the first thing I wanted to say is I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal story, and it's actually my version of my son's story. And so I just want to say that, you know, for safety purposes, I may say things that are triggering to people. And so if you feel the need to leave, please get up and, you know, go out. I won't be offended by that because, you know, it is a sensitive topic and I recognize that. So yeah, I'll just get started. So my oldest son, Albert, he just turned 29 years old. He was always, he always danced to his own tune. He was really unique and still is. Like he's just really, he walks in and his energy just fills the room. He's really an amazing person. He knows people everywhere he goes. But he never fit the mold and he never really fit in with his peers, and he didn't do well in school, even though he was brilliant. When he was in grade 3, they told us he was going to fail grade 3, and so we had some testing done, and he was reading at a. That's okay. That's okay. He was reading at a grade 8 level, and so you know, I said to the school, like, this doesn't line up. Like he's, you know, he's obviously skilled at language and math. He was doing math at a grade 5 level, and so they decided to kind of give him an informal diagnosis of saying that he was gifted. He was diagnosed with ADHD, and he played music, so he was very musical. He was in the grade 5 talent show. He broke a string on his violin, and he continued playing with the 3 strings that were left. So Music has always been his passion, and he's quite talented musically. So when he was in grade 9, he started. He's still struggling through school. Didn't fit in with the regular crowds. He kind of went into what they called at the time what they called the fringe. I don't know if they still call it the fringe or not, but to me, the fringe means, the fringe is on the margin. And so we're talking about people who are marginalized for whatever reason. And a lot of his friends came from, their parents lived in poverty. They were people who used drugs. They were kids who, didn't fit into the regular mold of what our society wants things to look like. And so he started experimenting with drugs in high school. I thought it was just kind of normal kind of teenage behavior until I found out that he was using cough syrup. And he was caught shoplifting cough syrup. They didn't charge him at the time, but he was using cough syrup to sleep. So he would drink a whole bottle of cough syrup and then go to sleep. And so I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn. There's so much stigma around substance use that I couldn't talk to my friends. I couldn't talk to people at work. Nobody at work knew. I didn't dare tell anybody. And so I just, our family just kind of suffered in silence. And he became, really agitated a lot of the time. It was really, really stressful. And without having any skills or any support, it was really difficult. And I remember kind of looking around at families where their kids were struggling because of health conditions. So, families whose kids had cancer, and they were surrounded by support. They had tons of support. The community just scooped them up and took care of those families. And my family suffered alone. And so when he was 19, he moved to Alberta, and so he hitchhiked to Winnipeg, and then he took a bus to Winnipeg, and then he hitchhiked to Medicine Hat from there. And so that was in 2013, and that started 4 years where he lived unhoused and used more and more drugs that whole time. He actually lived unhoused for 5 years, but he used a lot in those first 4 years. And so I spent a lot of time worrying, I was here, he was there. I worried. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn, and I was always afraid, of coming home. And is this going to be the time that there's going to be a police car in my driveway and someone's going to tell me that my kid's not alive anymore? And so, having no idea what to do, I just decided to. The only thing I could do as his mom was to try to keep a connection with him, because I knew that I couldn't change him. I couldn't change his mind. I couldn't make him do anything different than what he was going to do. And so I just started visiting him wherever he was, whatever city he lived in. I would go and find him and sit with him on the street. And so I did that in Calgary. I did it in Vancouver. I did it in Victoria. His dad visited him in Edmonton. I visited him in Medicine Hat. And it was, it was hard because I still had that, shame of this is what my kid is doing. And I had, people talking to me, oh, where's Albert now? Because my kid's in university and he's doing all these wonderful things. And, my kid was living on the street and using crystal meth and, panhandling. And how do I talk about that to other parents? And so, so for me, the connection was the only thing that I felt like I could do. And I remember very vividly. It was in 2016 when I thought, you know what, I have to let this go, because I was sitting on the street with him in Calgary, and I was watching people walk by, and they would look at me like kind of confused, because they'd be like, why is this woman sitting on the street, you know, when she clearly, you know, is not unhoused. And then they would look at him and their face would just turn to disgust. And I thought, you know, I was mortified for two reasons. The first was because I thought, wow, this is my kid, and I see him as somebody that I love, someone who's talented, someone who's smart, and someone who's worth something. And they're looking at him like he's not worth the dirt on their shoe. And but the second part that horrified me was that I recognized in their faces, I recognized my own biases. And I thought, you know what, I need to change, because I'm walking by people on the street and I'm looking at them and thinking the same things, you know, like looking at them as a person who is, you know, I'm seeing for them for the substance use, and I'm seeing them for their living situation, and that's not right. And being there with him and hearing his experiences, you know, storekeepers would come out if he was sleeping in front of their store in March when it's cold and he takes shelter there. They would come out in the morning and throw cold water on him to get him to wake up and move. And so, you know, in March in Calgary, being doused with cold water when you have no dry clothes and you have nowhere else to go has to be one of the cruelest things that anybody can do to someone. And so in that visit, I decided, okay, I have to change. And so I asked him, and I asked him without judgment, and I asked him without any kind of stigma attached to it. Tell me why you're here. Tell me what about this life is, you know, why do you want to be here? Why do you want to use drugs? Why do you want to do these things? And then we had like the first real open conversations that we'd had in a really long time. And he told me, like, I like using drugs. It makes me feel better. We never medicated his ADHD when he was a child. And so stimulants became his drug of choice, which stimulant medication is the treatment for ADHD. You know, we have 10% of our kids in school take stimulants by prescription so that they can do well in school. And so it doesn't take you know, it's not a huge stretch to draw a line between people with ADHD that's untreated taking stimulants on the street. And so, you know, once he told me this stuff and things started to click into place, I thought, this is really wrong. Like, all of this is wrong, and we need to do something better, but I didn't know where to begin. So later that year, 2016, he started having pain in his back. He went to the emergency room in Calgary, and he said, I have back pain. And they took one look at him and they said, no, you don't. Like, you're just here to get drugs. Go away. And he said to me, you know, it's really funny that they would say that to me, because I can get way better drugs on the street than anything they're going to give me in the emergency room. So why would they even say that? And because he had, you know, he was using intravenously, so his veins weren't great. They had a hard time getting blood from him. And it was causing him a lot of anxiety. And so they just said, fine, if you're not going to cooperate with us, we're not going to draw blood. And so he just was turned away and dismissed. He went back a second time because the pain was getting worse. And again, they turned him away. So the third time he went to the hospital, it was in an ambulance. And it was because his legs gave out. He had an abscess growing on his spine, and it grew so big that he was paralyzed from the waist down. It could have been prevented. They could have, you know, the emergency room could have picked up on it had they drawn blood, had they done an MRI, anything, they would have found it. But because of the stigma associated with his living conditions and his substance use, they didn't. And so I've worked in healthcare for, 26 years. And it was devastating for me to see that a patient would be treated with such dismissed in such a way that, you know, it would cause them to be paralyzed. Because, and the idea that it was his choices that brought him there. And so, you know, was it his choice to, you know, be stigmatized like that? No. Is it his choice to, you know, was it his choice to start using substances? Maybe. But there's a point where, you know, you have to look at substance use disorder is a diagnosable health condition, and it's in the DSM. It's no different from, you know, if we're not going to punish people for becoming type 2 diabetics and withhold medication from them, make them buy medication from the black market, why are we doing that to people with substance use disorder? Why is that so stigmatized? And so he started on his road to recovery through that. Physically, he had to learn how to walk again. He had surgery. I have a picture, and normally I show a slideshow. I have a picture. He had 42 staples running down the back of his spine after his surgery. He had to learn how to walk again. It took him months to learn how to walk. I'm so fortunate to work in healthcare, and that we have a really supportive harm reduction team here at the regional hospital. I brought him here. He got really great treatment. And he did learn how to walk again. He didn't stop using. They put him on what we're calling safer supply. I don't know if anybody knows that term, safer supply, but it's essentially pharmaceutical grade substances so that somebody doesn't have to use the street supply, because the street supply is toxic. We don't know where it comes from. Somebody could be cooking this, or probably is cooking this stuff in their kitchen. We don't know what's in it. People are dying every single day from the street supply of drugs. And so because he was recovering, the doctor said, okay, we need to give him, you know, a safe supply. So they prescribed him a safe supply of opiates to, you know, to get him through this period, and they were super supportive. From there, so this was by the time it was 2017, he went back to the street. He wanted to go back. He didn't want to stay at my house. He didn't want to stay and try to do anything different than what he was doing. But then he had a scare in 2017 where he used crystal meth again, and he started feeling tingling in his hands. And he said, wow, I can't keep doing this and still play music. I have to make some changes here. And so he was admitted to the hospital. Again, they didn't want to admit him. He called me, and I spoke to the hospital administrator. And I'm so privileged that I have a voice that I can communicate to hospital administrators and communicate to them and advocate for him on his behalf. So they admitted him. He had another MRI. They put him on more antibiotics to try to, you know, stave off the infection. And he just said, I'm ready. I need to stop. I need to stop. And so from there, it started his road. To recovery from substance use disorder. And so he stopped using opiates. He stopped using stimulants. And then, it took several years for him to stop using all substances. But which is, destination. It's a journey, and it's not linear. Everybody's recovery looks different. And we have this idea because of 12-step programs that recovery means abstinence, and that is not what it means. Recovery to me means wellness. And so when somebody is starting on a journey to recovery, they're actually starting on a journey to wellness. So for him, because he stopped using harmful substances in harmful ways, he was starting to improve his health. And he, in 2020, started having treatments for hepatitis C. And when he started those, he had to stop using alcohol. And when he stopped using alcohol, he was like, wow, I actually feel a lot better. Whether it was from the hep C or from the alcohol, his health just improved. And so, he started, and then he stopped smoking, because he was like, well, if I feel this good not using alcohol, maybe I should give up smoking. And then he found the same thing. And so now he still uses marijuana. he still uses psychedelics. He uses MDMA. He uses magic mushrooms occasionally. Are those substances harmful to him? Maybe. They're certainly not as harmful as using crystal meth. They're not as harmful as using opiates intravenously. For him, it's given him a balance of life. He can use substances recreationally without using them problematically. And so, to me, he's a success story. And he is now living in this situation of wellness where he's paying taxes, he has a driver's license, he has a bank account, he works. He's doing all these things that I never thought he would do. But he still has these things that haunt him from his past life. So he has a criminal record because he didn't show up for court dates. He has traffic charges for panhandling. He has an assault with a weapon charge, which was, he was attacked. He was beaten so badly that he ended up in the hospital. He tried to fight back with the only thing he could grab, which was a kitty litter scoop. And the public defender that was assigned to him took one look at him and said, just plead guilty. Like, this isn't worth my time, just plead guilty and it'll go away. So he now has a $2,500 fine that he's never been able to pay because he makes, he's just started earning money. And I get a letter from Revenue Canada every year that says, as soon as you're making $26,000 a year, we're gonna start garnishing your wages to pay for this fine. And your criminal record's not gonna be cleared until the fine is paid in full. And so there is no reward for him to get out of, for accomplishing what he's accomplished. And it's a huge accomplishment. So all of these things have really opened my eyes to the injustices that exist in our system. And I learned about a group called Moms Stop the Harm in 2018. And Moms Stop the Harm was started by a group of moms in Alberta and BC who had lost their children in 2015 to what they were then calling the opiate crisis. They lost their children, they started this group. We now have 3,500 members across the country. We advocate for evidence-based changes to drug policy because drug policy that we see currently today with prohibition, it's based on racism. All of the drug prohibition policies were to control certain populations. So opiates were made illegal because when they finished building the railroad in 1900, they had a big Chinese population that they were afraid were going to take over the country. And so we had racist politicians who wanted to make sure that we could control those people. So they made opium illegal. And that's where that came from. When they made alcohol illegal and white people started dying from the poisoned alcohol, the illegal supply, they overturned it and they made alcohol legal and said, okay, maybe it's better if we regulate it instead of prohibiting it. And so now we see all of these illicit substances that came about from wanting to control one population or another. None of it is evidence-based. There is no evidence that any of these, and in fact, there's evidence that is against the drug policies, saying that they are ineffective because we keep seeing more and more people dying. The drug supply is becoming more and more toxic. And so that's one of the things we advocate for. We advocate for harm reduction, which Julie's going to talk a little bit more about. Harm reduction in all provinces, because there's some provinces that have an anti-harm reduction stance because they think that harm reduction enables people to use substances. We advocate for support for families because there is not enough support. When I was going through it, I had no one to talk to and I was ashamed. And shame has no place anywhere. There's no reason for somebody to be ashamed for a health condition or for, and nobody has any business shaming another human being. And then what's our last thing? Oh, safe supply. We advocate for safe supply. And so what we want is a safe, regulated supply, because if you go to the store and there was an example of this, where Tylenol was contaminated with arsenic. There were a few people that died, and guess what Bayer did? They pulled all the Tylenol off the shelves and replaced it with untainted supply. If we had, if the headline read, a certain kind of wine kills 10 people, that wine would be coming off the shelf. If there's listeria in your lettuce, it comes off the shelf. It's the government's job to regulate what we consume so that we don't die. Yet there's this little group of substances that are controlled and they're not regulated. The black market isn't regulated. And so that is, we have to make a change there because we have 21 Canadians dying every single day from the tainted drug supply. And, what we've been doing by going after, I listened to a report that the DEA announced, we've identified these 2 drug cartels in Mexico that once we shut them down, fentanyl's gonna be gone. Fentanyl's gonna be gone. But the reality is we've got labs in Asia making fentanyl, making new analogs of fentanyl all the time so that they can get around the international drug laws. We've got guaranteed these 2 cartels have competitors that are gonna step up and take their place as soon as they are taken out. And so we're not changing the fentanyl supply. It's just gonna be more dangerous. There's gonna be more crime. There's gonna be more poison drugs. If the supply gets restricted in any way, which is what we saw in the pandemic, the borders closed in 2020, and we had no fentanyl coming in, and no, those drugs weren't able to get through. The supply routes were blocked. And so what happened? We had double the amount of deaths because people were scrambling. The demand was still there. People were scrambling to make drugs in Canada, cutting it with more lethal substances in order to supply the people who need it. And so we had the deaths double in the first year of the pandemic. So, we really have to rethink what we're doing, what we've been doing with drug policy for the last 100 years, and recognize it's not working and we have to come up with a better way. Did I miss anything, Julie?
I think you got it all. I think you did a good job.
Thank you. Did you want to introduce Julie? I think that's good for me, unless people want to ask questions now, or you want to save questions for after. What do you think?
Well, if you have questions right now, we can jump in with some questions. Otherwise,
We could
will
do them at the
introduce-
end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We admire you
Thank
a
you.
lot, and your experience is a lesson for all of us. So Julie Dingwell, she's the Executive Director at Avenue B, Harm Reduction Inc. She has a Bachelor in Sociology from the UMB. She was the Executive Director of AIDS St. John since 1999 and a founding member and chair of the Sex Trade Action Committee since 2005, in which Ruth participates as well. She has participated in several research projects, and in 2011, along with Commissioner Bill Reid of the St. John Police Force, she produced a harm reduction video for York University. Julie has been dedicated to harm reduction for over 30 years, and she knows about the barriers and the policies to be implemented, the activism, and especially the solutions. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Well, hi, everybody. So I'm just going to talk to you, and you can ask questions too about what harm reduction is, why it's important, and why we're in the city and trying to do what we do. Because in reality, what we're trying to do is save lives. I mean, it's that simple. We just don't want people dying. We don't want your children dying. We don't want you dying. And to give you a bit of perspective, one New Brunswicker is dying every 4 days. That's a lot of New Brunswickers. And so it's about the poison drug supply, as Emily was talking about. But you know, now, it used to be that people liked Dilaudid and Oxy. Well, now they want fentanyl. 11 people had overdosed and 2 had died. So it's, when I say it's about keeping people alive, it really is just that simple. It's how do we keep your children from dying before they might decide to make a lifestyle change, be that what it may. I think that, you know, for the most part, nobody ever wakes up and says, oh, I think I'll be a junkie and what a great way to live. Nobody ever does that. It's like nobody ever wakes up and says, oh, I want to do sex work on the street. Nobody ever wakes up and wants to do that. But, you know, sometimes people self-medicate for different reasons. I would say that out of all of the people who come to us, probably 75% come from dire poverty, abuse and neglect when they were very young children, just a lot of stuff that happened to them before they even got to the age of 5 or 6. So when we punish people that are using drugs, often we're hurting the most hurting people among us. They're already hurting. So the fact now that they're homeless and hungry and just to pray and the mercy of everybody, I mean, it's a crime to me that we do that we aren't more compassionate and that we don't see that nobody woke up and wanted that to happen to them. So I think that when we think about harm reduction, we have the needle distribution program, so people come in and they have new equipment so that they're not getting HIV or hepatitis C or, you know, many of the other things that can happen. We try to get people into, I mean, people are using crack and crystal meth at unbelievable levels. Our syringe numbers have fallen. The numbers that we give out, the year before last would have been about 460,000. We're down about 100,000, and those are largely due to maybe almost 100,000 pipes because people are smoking their drugs. So it's just as dangerous. But again, if you think about harm reduction, wearing your seatbelt, harm reduction, flossing your teeth, harm reduction. And you know, Emily mentioned diabetes. You could have a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, but you still go on eating sugar and candy and doing everything wrong. Nobody would ever say to you, well, you're not going to get any insulin from us. So, and that's just what we do to people who have substance use issues. And we now recognize this as it's a medical thing. This is an illness. And again, because not everybody who uses drugs will become addicted. This is just one of those things that we have to have a lot of compassion for everybody. We need to be thinking about what we can do as a community to make things better. We're looking at trying to open an overdose prevention site like they have in Moncton. In fact, they have them across the country so that people stop dying. I mean, it's that simple. We just want to stop people from dying. So at Avenue B, if you get hold of us, you can come in and it takes 20 minutes to get trained by naloxone. Another way to do it is you can go on the St. John Ambulance site and do their video and they'll send you a nasal naloxone. We don't have the nasal to give out, but we do have the injection. It's really easy to use, and again, you can save somebody's life. It's that easy. You don't need any kind of medical training, not anything like that. So I think, yeah.
And if it comes to that situation, comes to that point of needing you need that, don't worry about what's going on in the situation. If you guys are partying, there's other drugs around, there's just nobody's gonna get in trouble. Call 911, like if they don't care what else is going on, it's a medical.
It falls,
in trouble.
it falls under the Good Samaritan Act.
Yeah, there is a Good Samaritan Act. So if you come, if you're a friend, maybe you've all used together, but one person's not doing well and they're gonna die, the worst thing you can do is leave them there. Don't leave them there. Call 911, put them in the recovery position, and stay with them. Do whatever you can. If you've got naloxone, use it. If they're not breathing, maybe you can do a bit of CPR or something. Anything that's going to try to save their lives. It is, just try it. But the police will not prosecute people that hang around to stay with somebody who's overdosed. So, that just won't happen to you. So I think that, and we work closely with the police department. I've got to say that the St. John Police Force, from Bill Reed and probably, I don't know who was before Bill. Maybe was it Al Bodeshine, was he? Anyway, we've had a great police force. They're very progressive. We've not had a regressive police force that's wanted to stop all this. They've tried to support us in almost any way that they can. So, let's just work together to keep people alive, to keep people safe. Stigma's a killer. When we see all these homeless people and everybody thinks, oh, well, they're so messy, why aren't they doing more? Well, you know what? If you're living in a tent and you don't have an address, maybe you don't have a check, where are you getting garbage bags? Maybe you're very, very hungry, and having the stamina to be able to get up and do some of these things, maybe it's beyond you. So I'm just saying, not everything is perfect for everybody, but if we look at people with a little bit of kindness and compassion, because, I keep going back to, nobody ever woke up and thought that they wanted to be a drug addict, living in a tent, no money, not enough food, struggling to get by, lost my kids, lost my family. It's a lot. So when we turn our backs on people, it doesn't make anything better. Like, people just think, I recall a friend of mine who was having trouble with one of her sons, and somebody said, oh, well, if you just kick him out and put him out there, he'll soon buck up and figure things out. Well, he did, and he went to Vancouver and died. So, bucking up doesn't fix anybody's life. So, I don't know if you want me to touch on anything more. Come and see us at Avenue B. We provide, like I said, the training. We can come out and do training. And let's just try to look at everybody with a little bit of kindness and compassion, and realize that, everybody's just struggling to stay alive, and we're struggling to keep people alive. So, any questions for me or Emily, we're happy to talk to you, answer questions. If you want more information, we do have a wonderful symposium coming up on May 10th, and it's virtual, online. And this is the first time, this is our 5th annual symposium, and this is the first time that we're actually going back to the womb. So we're going to be having experts on childhood development. We're having Dr. Sarah Gander come and talk about, what can we do so that we don't end up talking about somebody 20 years later that, we never got through, never could do anything. Why don't we try to fix things earlier? And like I said, many of our people have come from absolute dire poverty, just dire poverty. They were conceived in poverty, they were raised in poverty, maybe had some mental health issues home. Alcohol's a big one, we don't talk about alcohol, but alcohol for our people is the gateway drug. Everybody say, oh, pot's the gateway drug. No, alcohol has been the gateway drug. And we forget about alcoholism, but there are many, many people who use alcohol, and we've let that fall off the map. So we have to get back to that too, because it's very important that people living with alcoholism get support too. So,
Can I just add something to that, Julie?
Yes.
So just to bounce off the alcohol point, you know, as a society, we have a really poor relationship with alcohol because we have this toxic alcohol culture where it's cool and it's trendy and there's, you know, mommy juice and all, you know, we use it to unwind. And if you're in a situation where everybody's drinking and you aren't, people are questioning you. Why aren't you drinking? Are you judging me right now?
Are you pregnant?
Are you pregnant? What, you know, and so we have to, as a society, kind of confront that or at least acknowledge it, you know, because people think that alcohol is safe. It isn't. There's actually studies that show that alcohol is the most dangerous drug that people consume. It's more addictive than any others. People who consume alcohol, 10% of those people will develop alcohol use disorder. People who use opiates, only 5% develop opiate use disorder. So we've always been told you use heroin once and you're hooked, but it's actually not true. People can use opiates recreationally. People use opiates short term all the time at the hospital. And they come home, they taper off of them, and they're fine. They don't come home addicted to OxyContin or hydromorphone. And so, you know, we have to kind of rethink the way that we've always thought about substances, especially alcohol. The other thing that Julie mentioned was about kids trying substances. So we have moms in our group who lost their kids the very first time they tried something. These are not people who have a problem. They're not people who have substance use disorder. It's kids who are experimenting. And a lot of times their friends will say, here, try this Xanax because it, you know, it feels good and you'll have a, you know, you'll sleep well and whatever. And they try it and it's actually fentanyl and they die.
yeah.
And so, you know, we have to protect our youth because we're doing them a real disservice because kids have been experimenting with substances since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And nobody's protecting them if the black market is in control of the supply. Because, you know, we have alcohol laws where you can't buy it if you're under 19. They can still get it, but what they're getting is safe. But that's not the case with illicit substances. One thing I wanted to mention too was about, sorry, I just took over. Fran.
No, go.
Was about language, because one of
Yes.
the things about stigma, and stigma, like Julie said, it's deadly. It kills people, you know? My son was paralyzed because of stigma, because of the stigma associated with his injection needle or injection substance use. He didn't receive treatment at the hospital when he should have. So we try to stop using language like addict and, you know, junkie and
Abuser, drug abuser.
drug abuse, you know, clean and dirty. We don't talk about clean and dirty because if you're, you know, if you say you're clean, that means that you're dirty when you're using substances, and that's not fair.
Yeah.
So, you know, we try to talk in people first language too to avoid labeling people. So we say a person who uses substances, and you've heard me kind of talking this way throughout the presentation. We would say, you know, if somebody is clean, maybe we would say that they're not currently using. And if they're dirty, they're currently using, you know, so we would, and instead of saying a clean needle or a dirty needle, we would say a used needle or a sterile needle.
Yeah.
And so to try to get away from this labeling people as, you know, in
Sex
that
trade
stigmatizing
worker
way.
instead
Yeah.
of prostitute. You know, it's because sex work is work. And I think that for a long time, people forgot that, and it's just like, well, oh, they're just prostitutes. No, they're not. They're moms, they're sisters, they're aunts, they're friends, you know. They're the same as almost everybody, except maybe there's a different role that they play, a different role to make money. So I think that, you know, again, if we give everybody a bit of a break and just back off, because we don't have to be so judgmental. Nobody needs you to tell them that things aren't going good, like you don't look so good, or you still using, eh? Like, nobody needs that. They just don't. They need support.
And the biggest thing I would like to see in, you know, we hear a lot of people,
It's down the hall. Oh, sorry.
that's okay, go ahead. So the biggest thing I would like to see, and we see a lot of this happening in Vancouver right now, I'm not sure who follows the news and you know, keeps an eye on the downtown east side of Vancouver. The downtown east side, for anybody who doesn't know, that's where there's the largest population of unhoused people and substance users in the country. It's Canada's Skid Row is what they call it. So right now, they're moving the encampments. So they see the tents, they're moving people out of the way, they're relocating them somewhere else. And we heard a lot of that here in St. John, especially last fall, like get rid of the tent cities, move these people out of here, you know. And what I would like to see, instead of people saying, somebody needs to do something about this, I'd like to see people say, how can I help? What can I do? And, you know, how can we, instead of, let's get rid of people, how can we support people? And, you know, it's an important, you know, we all have a role to play in this. We all have a role to play.
And some people live in tents because they just simply couldn't live in a shelter. If you have some mental health issues, and it can depend on whatever they are, you may not be able to stay in a shelter with 50 other people.
I know,
You just may not be able to do it.
I have a friend who just recently got an apartment. She's tenanted for years. The apartment's actually causing her anxiety. She said when she tenanted, she was in better shape. She doesn't sit in front of the TV. She was up every day,
Yeah.
and silent and happy. And, you know, it's just because they're intense, they're not sad.
That's right.
Most of them are quite happy, right?
Yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to say, before we can kind of, you know, really open it up for questions without us interrupting all the time. Because I didn't have any support when I was going through it, I facilitate a support group for families who have a loved one who's struggling with substance use disorder or working on recovery. And it's a little bit different from a 12-step program, because we use an approach called invitation to change. And we recognize people from where they're at. And we don't require people to admit that they have some kind of a character defect and that they have to admit to their character defect and make amends in order to move past that. We just recognize people for who they are and for where they're at. And so we have the support group is for New Brunswick. If I have some brochures here, if anybody wants to take one, it's a closed group, so it's confidential. Everybody has to sign a confidentiality agreement before they join. We have it online via Zoom, and we also use the space at Sophia Recovery to meet in person. So if anybody's interested in that, I have some brochures, and I also have some brochures for Moms Stop the Harm if anybody's interested in getting involved in advocacy to help add to the voices that really want to make a change. And Julie's got some stuff here too.
I do. I have some handouts around Avenue B, what we do. You know, and there are things now like hepatitis C. Used to be a killer. You know, it was a slow killer. We can cure hepatitis C. It's curable. So, you know, there's so many advances that we've made. So let's use them, get involved, talk to people, find out what's available, and then get the people you know going to things, or you go to things. But, you know, get involved a little bit and find out why we're here tonight and why this is important.
I have two questions. Nobody is going to ask anything, so I'm going to jump in.
I have a question up here.
You first, please.
Oh, okay. So, you talked a lot about how everyone has an obligation or a duty to help these people. Living with someone that had a substance abuse issue and still does and is now unhoused, and my brother-in-law passing away, I want to be an advocate for these people because they are human, like you said. How do I, being a little citizen of St. John, New Brunswick, how do I help somebody? Like I want to help. I just want to do it. I want to, my family, my son, like everyone in my family just wants to help. And we've, you know, served meals at Outflow, and we've done all these things, and we've sat with people, and my partner does security in Outflow and the Bellier Arena. Like he's working overnights to help these people because his two brothers have substance abuse problems. But we just wanna do more, we don't know how to do it. That's
You
all.
are helping and doing a lot. So I'd suggest that you just keep on helping, but maybe join one of the support
Oh, I will.
groups or, yeah. And, you know, you'll maybe lean towards something from there. Come to Avenue B, talk about volunteering. You know, so there's lots of ways to get involved and get engaged.
Yeah, and we can certainly support you with that, like, we have, so, every year on August the 31st, there's it's International Overdose Awareness Day. It started in Australia, and it's recognized across, all over the world. We held an event last year in St. John, and it was pouring rain. We had it in King Square, it was in the middle of the week, and we were really hoping to draw people in, because we had lunch boxes and we had all
And
kinds
it
of
wasn't
stuff.
just pouring, it was sheets of rain.
It was a
It
downpour.
was.
Yeah, so actually, some of my brochures, if you pick up a brochure that looks like it has a little water damage, that's why, because they were with me
Yeah.
at the event last August. But that's something that you can certainly get involved in.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you want to join Moms Stop the Harm or sign up for our newsletter,
Yeah,
then you'll get notifications of events. And that's where I learned everything, was just by, you know, talking to other advocates and learning as much as I could
Yeah.
about drug policy.
Julie, will you send that notice out, to council, because there's 3 of us here, but there's 11 of us in total.
sure,
And then we can push that out through our own
Okay.
social media.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great.
What about the statistics in St. John? Because you talked about New Brunswick as a whole, but what's happening in St. John about the overdoses?
Well, we definitely are losing people every week pretty well, you know, it's like 2 people last week. So it's here, it's in St. John, it's not Vancouver anymore, you know, we talk about it being away, it's here. Yeah.
Fortunately, we got too many young people today, so about the naloxone training, for example, if you can elaborate a little bit more, because they could go and receive the training
Yeah,
free of cost, and just because they are hanging around, no?
Yeah.
Just to help some others. So it's not necessarily that they are
Yeah.
using, but they can help some friends or
Yeah.
in parties, etc.
well, exactly, if you know anybody at all who's using any kind of opiate, it's good to get naloxone trained. I have a friend whose mother's 93, who has been on Oxy for years, so they went out and got naloxone trained, so that, because she could very well have an overdose. So it can happen to anybody. It's really so easy to provide somebody with naloxone. The nasal that you can get through St. John ambulances is pretty easy. We cannot provide the nasal. The province provides us with naloxone. And so we have the injectable, but it's really easy too. I mean, it's really easy. But like I said, if you go on the St. John ambulance site, you can get your own nasal naloxone.
So what I would like to see in St. John is for city transit workers to carry naloxone. For
The library.
businesses uptown to have a naloxone kit as part of their first aid kit. You know, for people to carry naloxone and it to be normalized. I carry one on my, on my purse, even though the chances, the places where I go to the hospital, like chances are I'm not gonna use it. But I wanna normalize it for people, like, it's okay to carry a naloxone kit because you could save a life.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
I did. So we talk about naloxone and how it inhibits the opiate uptake, right?
Yeah.
If they're not on an opiate and we use it, are we going to, it's not gonna cause any ill
They
effects?
give
it's not gonna-
naloxone to newborns at the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you don't have an opioid, there's nothing for it to work against.
Right, so then in that situation, how long would it this is probably all gonna be in the training, but how long does it take for it to, do you know that it's actually working, so that you don't have to try something else?
Oh, within minutes,
Okay.
yeah, within minutes. And if it isn't working within minutes, well, then you give them another shot. We actually have one person, we had to give 5 shots before they came back around, because it depends how much fentanyl they've used and, yeah, so it just, yeah. But always call 911, always call 911, because if you can't bring somebody back right away, the most important thing is that they're getting oxygen, to their brain. That's the most important thing. These kids come with the little mouthpieces, a plastic mouth shield and stuff, so that you can do a breath and then you can do some chest compressions. And maybe if this is a call for people to get first aid trained, learn how to do CPR. Yeah,
Another form of harm reduction.
yeah,
Right,
another form
CPR
of harm
training.
reduction,
Yeah.
CPR training. Yeah, so there's, many ways that we use harm reduction every day in our lives, we do. But this one, it's a different kind of harm reduction. Anybody
Questions,
else?
please? Yes, at the end, at the back.
We don't train people to do CPR, but we do the naloxone training.
Is there a spectrum of the problems? How are they testing or is it just reaction?
We, Ensemble has a spectrometer in Mountain. And we have the drug testing strips for, a lot of drugs.
Do we know what's going on?
Well, we do know, that the benzos are being added to the fentanyl, and that's just deadly.
If we're not testing stuff, putting warnings out anywhere.
No, we do when we know that there's something new happening, like a couple of weeks ago, there was red fentanyl. So we were, put a notice up that this red fentanyl seemed to be stronger, that people should try a little bit first, or,
So any warnings that come out, I'm not sure where this one came from, but most warnings that come out either come from coroner toxicology
Yeah.
reports, or they come from, that's where the bromazolam,
Yeah.
that's where that one came from. And the other place is from when the police seize substances, they send them to their lab for testing, and so we can get alerts from that route. There is a national working group for testing substances, and so there's drug checking services in BC and in Toronto. We don't have anything like that here. Hoping to.
sometimes at concerts and stuff, like the big concert that happens at PEI, I know that there's people there that provide testing and stuff.
Yeah, it's all the reagent stuff.
Yeah,
Here, I think, do you guys give out fentanyl test strips?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can get fentanyl test strips, but if you're intending to use fentanyl, it's not really useful. It's only useful if you're using, if you think it's
yeah, if
something else
something else.
to check and see if
Yeah,
it's fentanyl.
so that's the tricky part, yeah, and it doesn't tell you how much fentanyl or the
Or if
strength
there's
of it.
anything else in it,
Yeah.
if it's cut with anything else. Because I think they're seeing fentanyl in crystal meth sometimes too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
people
just
are
never
mixing
know.
things.
never
Yeah.
know what you're getting.
No.
Yes, Mayor, please.
I'm just wondering, this recording, is it gonna be available?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because that would be great to have. I think it's been very informative. Emily, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Julie. We're probably gonna take off shortly, but I just wanted to say that it has been informative. I like your idea about transit. So I'm gonna approach transit on that idea as well for maybe some training and we're gonna be in contact with you anyway about getting a tour of the place for council as well. So just to, all knowledge is good.
All
You know,
knowledge is good.
is good, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, it's good to get this perspective.
Yeah.
So appreciate it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll look forward to that recording.
What about, Julie, the reactions that you have seen lately? Not more about the behavior or the reactions because of the toxicity of the drugs, right?
What, do you mean in crystal meth? Well, people get psychosis
Yes.
a lot of times after using it for prolonged times. And again, it's not good quality stuff. It's basically being cooked wherever and done whatever to. So people don't really know that they're getting what they're getting. But we have found a lot of psychosis on the street from people that have used crystal meth for any length of time. And so,
know what they're going through. How could we get the city involved, our police officers, so their first encounters aren't so bad? Like, teach these officers it is an addiction. You know, like they've never once stopped there, you know, to interact, to talk, like, what are you guys doing? Like, this is all, there's about 10 to 15 of us. Like, they just drive by, it's like no acknowledgement. How could we get even their social workers involved? Like, to come down and, you know, talk to them,
Be
like,
out there, like,
Yeah.
instead of just like, almost
We
like
do
they're
this all
checking, like,
volunteer.
to see who's
Right.
there and if there's a wanting warrant, that's how they feel.
yeah.
like get them involved so that in the apartments, like we've gotten a few of them into apartments, $8.95 a month. You just throw them in there after being off the street.
Yeah.
Of course, they're not gonna make it. Where's the counseling for that?
Right. Well, I mean, I'd be talking
Like
to
how-
Minister
who-
Dorothy Shepherd and asking her those
We've tried.
questions.
We
Well,
tried.
you just have to
Yeah.
keep at it. That's just one of those things to keep at this government. You know, we have, what, an $850 million surplus? We
Mhm.
could be putting a little bit of money into, the things that matter to people.
Yep.
But they have to know that they matter. So you have to call people, you know, call them and bug them and bug them. Ask Dorothy Shepherd, you know, what are people supposed to do? Ask the Minister of Housing what people are supposed to do. You know, we have, one of the, if not the lowest, maybe the second lowest income assistance rate in the world. So if, you know, when people think, oh, look at those lazy bums, they can't even get up off their ass and, you know, they're laying all over the street and all of this. Well, you know what? You try to go find an apartment for $570 a month and feed yourself. Impossible.
Tim Hortons on Waterloo took the tables out, locked their bathroom, and now they can't even sit on the concrete.
They
Or
were
you'll be
having a
arrested.
huge problem at Tim Hortons. They had, you know, maybe 100 people there every day openly dealing drugs in the parking lot. And, you know, so you have to think about it from a business point of view. And so that's where we work as community. For instance, when we started the Sex Trade Action Committee, some of the residents were saying, like, you know, the wonderful Anne-Marie McGrath said, well, my problem with the sex trade people is that I'm not getting enough sleep. And so everybody said, what? And she said, well, you know, if I see a girl get in the car at 11 just before I'm going to bed, I can't go to bed until I see her get back. So, you know, there's a lot more. This city is so compassionate, I have to say that. I've been 23 years between 8 St. John and Avenue B, and I can count on one hand, the phone calls that we've ever had of people saying like, shut down, it shouldn't be there, or anything like, one hand. It just doesn't happen. We more get calls, like we had an elderly woman call who said that her son had died of cancer and she had leftover syringes, could we possibly use them? So there's a lot of compassion in this city. There's people all over that are working like you to make things better. And you know what, your meals and stuff, that does to make things better for people.
To us,
Because-
it's a little thing,
But
to
it's
them,
not to them.
no.
Because they tell us about it,
Yeah.
about how they were given some food and it was just kindly given, and you didn't have to do anything to get the food. So I think that, you know, we have people donating tents and sleeping
Yes.
bags. And they can be gently used, that's okay.
Yep.
But because we know that as soon as the shelter closes on the 30th, our homeless are back out on the street.
Mhm.
We have many people that will still be, they'll go to the other shelters. But for the most part, we're gonna see the homeless again. And so we're gonna see tents again,
Yep.
and that's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. There are not enough places for people to live. And even if we had more places, they wouldn't be able to afford them on the $600 less a month that the province gives them to live on. And you know what? People say, oh, they're lazy bums, could go out and get a job and blah, blah, blah. Well, one, that's never gonna happen. The whole Canadian economy was never built on full employment. So we're a war-based economy, still are. There's never gonna be full employment. So us berating constantly people that aren't able to work or aren't able to get a job, futile. Don't do that. It's more important that we allow people to recover in the best ways they can, to support people as they recover the best way that they can. And you know what? It's like when my kid used to get into trouble or do whatever, I just say, I don't care what you do, I'm gonna love you through it. And he'd just laugh, oh yeah, sure. But it was true, and I did. I just loved him through it. And he was pretty rotten sometimes, and I still loved him through it. So, a lot of times we treat people like they're throwaway people. And nobody's a throwaway person. We all belong to somebody. And the people that we think that we're having trouble with in our community, they weren't beamed in from another planet. They're our people. These are the people that belong to us. Their moms, their sisters, their brothers, their uncles, their friends. They're our people. Yeah.
I also wanted to just add to that, like to kind of also answer your question. The reason Julie and I are here, I'm sure, I don't know how many of you have heard about the Police Chiefs Community Action Group. So he had a headline in the paper last summer, I think, and it said, his headline was, "We need to stop arresting the dying." And so he acknowledged that, it's not an issue that we can arrest our way out of, that, these people need help, they need support. And so he formed a community action group and he called a bunch of people around the table. Julie and I ended up there. We ended up so there's a substance use subcommittee that we are a part of. It's got a lot of community partners, like from Riverstone Recovery. There's someone from Coverdale. We've got a member of the police department is on the committee with us. And so when we met, we've been meeting over the last almost a year now, and we had to set goals. And one of our goals of the substance use subcommittee, because we recognize that nothing's ever going to change unless we can change the mind of the politicians, first of all. And the politicians are never going to change their minds unless the people push them to change, right? Because they do what the voters want them to do.
Yeah.
And so we also recognize that there are people who are opposed to all of this, and their voices are the loudest, because the people who, believe in humanity and believe in harm reduction, we try to be loud, but then there's the people who are kind of in the middle who are like, ooh, I'm not sure how I feel about this, I'm not sure where, where it lands with me. And so that's why we invited you guys here tonight, was because we wanted to talk about, their mission is and what my mission is, and just to, kind of give you guys some information to, so that you can decide where you land, which side of this issue you do land on. And we're hoping that you land on the humanity side, but that's okay. If you don't, if you land on the traditional side, that's okay too.
And I wish we had brought that wonderful words are powerful weapons, because they are. And we have, somebody wrote something for us that talks about that, about how words kill people. They do. And that, but I loved her very last line was, if you can't say something kind, basically shut up. Like just, We don't need to hear any of your hateful messages or messages that demean or belittle people. If you can't be kind, be quiet.
But to answer your question about the police, we've had these conversations in front of the chief.
Yeah.
And he's been extremely supportive. And there was an article in CBC last week or the week before where he actually was quoted as saying, I don't need more police officers, I need social supports.
Yeah.
And so he, you know, I feel like, I mean, they're still cops, right? Did anyone, I invited them to come. I don't know if they came, I just thought I should check myself for a
But the
second.
Sex Trade Action Committee was a result of the police.
Right, so they
You know,
are
putting an
supportive.
ad in the paper and wanting to know if people were impacted by prostitution. They don't even use that word anymore. They say sex worker.
We just look like you can't stop and make yourself present
Yeah,
just to talk.
we'll have a talk with
Like,
them.
just talk.
And
Get
we-
out of your trap.
And they are one of our groups
Yeah.
that we want to talk to.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
because we
So-
recognize that that's,
Yeah.
and that's, you know, so the people on our group are kind of the leaders. And so you're talking about more the street level, you know,
Yeah.
the front line.
Yeah.
And so
And they're
that's,
probably maybe afraid to stop because, for instance, you know, we'll say at Avenue B if they have to come for something, we'll say, well, don't show up in your bloody uniform with a gun,
yeah.
you know? So, you know, they may be afraid to stop for fear that people won't want to go and eat or get something from you. They may actually feel that way that,
The ones that we deal with, and now we're getting down to the kids. We had 12 to 15-year-olds now that are coming for the meals on Saturday and
Yeah.
close. Even just the kids, like, stop, take a walk up, hey, you know,
Yeah.
how you doing? They know them by name.
we'll
Like,
talk with
hey,
them. We'll
Gary,
make
We
that
definitely
happen.
will.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
thank you.
Because
for
we
that.
do it with them, we answer the calls, like Sam, the one that started it, all hours of the night. The girl does not stop, and she has
She's
4
phenomenal.
kids. 4 kids,
There's
yeah.
no words for her. She's so phenomenal.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Like, she will answer the call all hours of the night if you need it.
Literally.
And she just would like a social worker, you know, the mayor, stop by on Saturday. It's been the last couple of years from 4 to 6. Stop by, just,
and I do want to
Socialize with
put a plug in for the city, very, very supportive, working with us all the time to try to figure out better ways to do things. So, and sometimes, you know, it's little things that people don't think about. The yellow bins on the street corners where people can dispose of needles. The city places those, well, actually, they bought the first 4 or 5, but they actually install those for us and, you know, do things like that. Donna Reardon was here tonight with the deputy to talk about, you know, to come and listen and hear what more they could do. So I think that, you know, we've got Wayne Long, has been a huge supporter of harm reduction right across the country. He has stood up for those things. So we do have people like that. We've got David Hickey here, who's another huge supporter of the work that we've been doing. So I think that it's out there. We will talk with the police. How you're gonna get a social worker to drop in, well, that's.
we've tried calling.
What else, I don't mean to interrupt Julie, but
Yeah.
I'll just add, they are starting new walking patrols with the police in certain priority neighborhoods. So like I live on Waterloo, so a huge concern for us is, I hate calling the police because I don't want a police response to certain issues.
Right.
If someone's having a mental health crisis, I don't want a cop to show up. But what's really powerful is if they are doing walking patrols, a lot more cops will get familiar with the neighborhoods and then also get familiar with the
Yeah,
people in the
the
view
people.
and understand how to react to them
Yep.
appropriately. So I'm
Yeah.
really
There's
looking forward to
Gary,
that.
you know, you're gonna talk to him a
Yeah.
little bit easier,
Yeah.
and there's, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Can I just make a comment? So, like I said, my partner does the security over at the Valier. And when the Valier opened this past fall or whatever, they were very concerned about having security there because they didn't want that stigma attached to someone there just authority to tell me what to do. And after his first night, they welcomed them with open arms. So there's also the thought that we think that their perception is that the police are bad, but it's not one bad apple that makes it so it's so bad to the people. Now I'm not telling, like, I can't say that every security guard would be that. He's a very compassionate person, so, if we keep trying and we keep putting ourselves out there, putting, plugging away, then eventually the walls will come down and they just trust you, right? There's no trust, so they trust you. Like, if you get down on their level and sit with them and have a conversation and talk about how they're doing that day and offer them a glass of water, and you're kind, like, they just want you to be kind instead of looking down on them, right? Like, it's just,
They just want to be treated as
they
a
want to
human
be treated
being.
as human beings. It's so sad.
We have one girl, she's 33, she was a nurse at the regional, and she is now living in Tin City. She was a nurse.
I do want to say that a few years ago, there was a book written called Sex Workers in the Maritimes Talk Back. So these researchers interviewed people in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, PEI, and New Brunswick. And the St. John cops stood out heads above everybody else as being reported as the kindest, the most caring, and they were saying things like, you know, a lot of times, now there's not so many sex workers on the street anymore because people use cell phones. But even the ones that are out, the cops will come by when it's cold, bring them a cup of coffee. Or say, can I go get you a cup of coffee? Do you want to sit in and get warm? Those things happen all the time. And we just don't hear enough about it, about the good things that they do all the time, yeah.
I have a question for the audience. So would you feel like better if the cops would be seated here, like comfortable and I don't know.
I think a lot of them should.
Do you think that would be a good way to build trust?
Yes, that's their first encounter.
Would
Is
we be
police
comfortable
normally.
here, like to have them here?
Yes, like having this conversation with them as well.
Absolutely. I think they should be ashamed of themselves not to be here.
There,
But when I was younger, the cops walked the beat. Rick Russell, remember them all?
Yep.
Like they would walk the beat, the boardwalk, and my friends' kids weren't scared of a cop. People's kids these days are scared of a cop. Oh, pigs, this and that, whatever. You know, cops are there for other reasons too, right? But the thing with me is, people shouldn't let their kids get scared of cops. Like,
Well, we used to do things like the cops were on horses in Rockwood Park
Yeah.
and stuff, and it really built relationships with the kids.
because it was a lot better back then.
Yeah,
Now, it's gotten so out of control that nobody knows how to deal with it now. Because they've just let it go so long. So where do you start now?
well, I think that we start where we're starting here, that we sit down and have conversations, and that's what Emily and I and Brenda wanted to do, was just to be able to open things up so that people could ask questions about, and you can ask questions about anything. Just anything at all. So, we just want to make the community feel safer and better about each other. It's, we go back to that kindness piece, that instead of maybe walking by somebody and pretending they don't exist, giving them a nod and saying, hi, how you doing today? They don't have to answer, you don't even have to say that, but you don't have to look at them with disgust
Yeah.
either. So it's just realizing that
Indifference,
nobody
Yeah.
wakes up and that's where they choose to be.
Yep. And now they can't even get a place to live,
No,
so it's even harder for them to get off the street.
absolutely.
And we've called every rehab from here to Bathurst, 10 beds, and you're on a waiting list for 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
And when they
So
want
where do
help,
they go?
want help immediately.
And
That's
it
very second.
It should be
Yeah.
on demand. Can you imagine if you got diagnosed with cancer and they said, yeah, we're gonna have a spot for you
Yeah.
in 6 months?
Yep,
No, it wouldn't
we've
happen.
called everywhere.
Yeah,
And that's what the waiting list
You see at 50,000 a month or whatever.
Yeah, you can't do it. And then when they do go to rehab and get out, they go back to the street. If that's all they know and they've done it for so long, and that's your friend, you're gonna walk by John and not say, hey, John, and You know, that could be the trigger. They just throw them out of the rehab without another place to go to get into the living.
And one of the committees of the police chiefs committees are working on our release details, release planning. So whether it be from hospital or from jail or anywhere else, that there's plans put in place before people are released.
We're just, how long does it take? We've lost so many kids. I could probably name 40 right now that we have lost in the last year.
Yeah.
And there's still.
But, you know, and again, like that's part of the stigma and stuff, like people think, oh, they can't keep apartments, they can't do anything. Well, if you haven't grown up with some sort, you know, people to model around how you pay bills, how you take care of an apartment, how you live in an apartment.
There's a
It's-
lot, sorry just to interrupt you, but there's a
No.
lot of able people too, right? Like, when I stand in front of Avenue B and I look at you, let's say, you know, by Friday, you're tired, right? You put a long weekend and God bless you, you do a great job, but there's a lot of able people, like, why can't some of these, myself even, so, go and clean up. You know, don't get the snack from Avenue B until you bring some garbage back, or do some, like, nobody's doing anything. Everybody's just sitting around watching these garbage pile up, nobody's doing anything. There's a lot of able people that could be doing stuff, a lot of people. Whether it be pick up garbage for your Gatorade or bus token or whatever, just something, because there's people that can do it. And it could change uptown a little bit, you know?
Well, I think, you know, organizing something like that might give people kind of a sense of community too, instead of, because where's the motivation to, you know, take care of the community if they're being treated like they're on the outside of it?
Yeah, they're garbage.
Right?
Yeah.
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 So, yeah, I think there's something there for, you know, potential.
Anybody else?
More questions?
Go ahead.
And I'm sorry if I came in late, so I don't know if it's been covered, but I find living on Waterloo Street, and so I get my neighbor the other day, and she was just talking about, you know, she had lived on the street, was able to get herself clean through some programs like yours and efforts like that, but is on the line and was able to get herself an apartment, was able to see her kids again, and just was talking about how difficult it is to, all she can afford is to live in Waterloo Village, but to be surrounded by the people that she's with so often is an incredible challenge for you. So, like, how do we at a municipal level deal with encampments, people living in our more vulnerable neighborhoods like that? Like, I know, like, Eric Weissman was on CBC a little while ago talking about potentially having designated encampment zones. Like, are they solutions that are reasonable
Well,
to you? Like,
I think the
what is the real
solutions are
balance there?
housing. And, you know, I think for the past 2 decades, maybe more, all levels of government have just washed their hands of housing. And so we don't have new housing stock. We've not kept up with the number of units that are needed. And that's why, you know, not only are ordinary people homeless, we have like women, and I just hate to say it, older women doing terrible things with other people so that they have a place to sleep at night, so that they can sleep on somebody's bloody couch. And they're elderly women and elderly men. How many times do you see an elderly guy and he's just got nothing? They've got absolutely nothing. And you know, if people don't have a safe place to lay their head at night, the chances of a good long recovery, you know, how could you do that? Right? You can't keep your meds safe. You can't keep yourself safe. You're just worried all the time. I can't even imagine what it's like to sleep in a bloody tent.
Well, and I think the longer the amount of people that are on the street right now spend on the street, the longer that road to recovery is.
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, no one's mental health is getting better living on the street.
No.
Right, so that gap widens and certain animosity builds between people who are in the community
Absolutely.
and people who are, people who are living in the community in safe
Yeah.
housing and people who aren't.
Yeah.
Like, so, and that animosity and gap grows, which is really frustrating.
Yeah, really frustrating.
One of the biggest issues with housing is that it's controlled mostly by the private sector. And so, you know, it's profit based. And so, you know, we need more nonprofit housing and we need more government-owned housing in order for people to be able to be housed without the threat of being evicted. Because anybody in the private sector, they're looking out for their own financial interests, and so they evict people. And, you know, I know Julie has talked to me about people that have been, you know, they've had to rehouse how many times in a year? Like, you know, every month they're looking for a new place. It's difficult.
Thank you.
Yes, very difficult. Yeah, and the supports aren't there. And again, you know, New Brunswick has one of the, if not the lowest income assistance rate in the country. And we should just be totally ashamed of that. Just ashamed that we force people to live in dire poverty. What is that? You know, that we all can sit here tonight and think it's okay that somebody gets $600 a month, and then we call them, you know, oh, you're just nothing, you can't even look at, we're giving you that $600 and look at you, living in a tent and you're dirty.
And then judging them for how
And
to
then,
cope with it.
yeah, and then they have a, you know, a breakdown and we think, oh, you know. So, again, I go back to this has to become political. You have to be calling the premier and saying, you know what, it's not okay. What is going on, it's not okay. You need to jump into building housing and you need to do it tomorrow. Not, we don't want 40 units in 3 years. No, that's not any good. We want 400 units and we want them this year.
I was just gonna say, if you look at the encampments that are around, these people are brilliant. The stuff that they can build, with the things that they
Very
have,
resourceful.
they're very resourceful, and they're actually withstanding the weather. If we could take their skill and allow them to help build a place for them to live,
Yeah,
they may be worth
yeah,
looking after it. You know what I mean? Like, they talk about Habitat for Humanity. Why can't we have these people help build their place to live?
yeah.
Give them the tools, give them the education.
Well, I
give
think
them
that if there was a place and that was happening, people would be
I
happy
think
to
they
help.
would, I know they would.
But-
I called Habitat for Humanity for help. My son's autistic and I was constantly getting complaints about just him being autistic. So I was like,
Yeah.
I have a little house, no neighbors
Yeah.
around the walls. Anyways, they told me that I didn't have enough money to qualify, and where I was in a wheelchair, I couldn't participate in actually building the house. They couldn't help me. Call me if my situation changes, and I was like,
They
okay.
don't think you can use a hammer if you're in a
Well, I
wheelchair.
told them that I did
Yeah.
work myself. I said I could probably pay
Yeah,
like halfway up, but then we could buy a computer.
Yep.
Then somebody else would just have to finish it.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's
there
something.
should be
that's behind me,
accommodations for that, yeah.
Right, so, and he said it in a nice way, but that's basically what he said. He said, what I just said.
Yeah,
And I was just like,
I get you, I get you.
My situation's not gonna change, I'm not gonna magically.
Yep.
You can
But it all comes down to politics. I hate to say it, but it does. It just does. That's where the money is. You know, we don't have the money to be raising like money for rents and all of that. Like, we just possibly couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So talk to your politicians. If you're pissed off about something, pick up the phone and call them or email them. Like, I'm telling you, well, how do you say that, whatever, the heat? Something gets, you know, the more heat you apply, you're gonna get better results. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. That's what I'm trying to say.
Join
So make it
forces with
really
us.
squeaky.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
join forces with us, you know, we're
Yeah.
having events all the time, we're happy to welcome you into our fold. What was the other thing I was gonna say?
June 15th?
We're holding more events, yeah, okay, I can talk about that. So we have a harm reduction symposium coming up, which Julie already mentioned. Also on June 15th, we're gonna be back here at Prude, with, Dr. Tim Christie. He's the Regional Director of Ethics for Horizon Health Network. And he's gonna be giving a talk called I think it's called the Ethics of Harm Reduction. And so he's gonna be talking again about harm reduction, but why ethically we need to provide this. And so, you know, if if you want to get involved and you want to help, you know, not everybody can do everything, like, people have certain skills, so if you wanna get involved and work with Avenue B and, you know, do frontline work like you guys do, that's great. If you're more of a talker or you wanna write letters to government people, then, you know, you can do that. If you, even just talking to your neighbors, talking to your friends, and tell them like, listen, I went to this presentation and it opened my eyes, or, you know, the most important thing that I really want people to get out of us talking and me sharing my story is for people to have that moment, like, maybe I need to rethink this and I need to make a change within myself in order to, you know, make this better. And, you know, that's what we need. We need people to, you know, the more people that, you know, that believe in this and that think there's a better solution than what we're doing right now, then that's gonna drive the change. That's gonna drive the politicians to make the change. Because they're here to serve the voters, right? So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we give them an applause? Yeah, I think that as Julie and Emily mentioned, we will have more homeless people in the streets rapidly, because we didn't pay attention to affordable housing. That is going to happen really soon. Really soon. We will make sure as well that we tell the police about this feedback, because we're going to see them tomorrow and any other day, but I'm going to see them tomorrow. They have been doing different initiatives such as Coffee with a Cup. Now they came to Truth some time ago to talk with newcomers, to talk with young people, etc. So they have like different strategies, but we want to tell them about this session today, and hopefully they will join us for the next one.
Saturday supper time,
4 to 6.
4 to 6.
Avenue B.
Okay.
Advocacy, no? As we mentioned, I believe that if we collect more efforts and if we work collectively, we're going to drive better solutions. And take the resources as well that Emily and Julie brought for your friends. Maybe you're not going to use it today, but you're going to give it to a neighbor some other time. Thank you. Please grab some of food. We brought.
Yes, grab some food.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.